The college baseball experience on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by edgeboost.bet. Go over there, get over, and I didn't pull up my ad sheet prior to this, but edgeboost.bet, great partner of SGPN. Head over there and use the promo code SGPN for a $25 deposit bonus. And welcome in, everybody, to the college baseball experience. Myself, Noah Bieniek, just botched that intro, but I'm joined by Rocco Miller, a professional bracketologist, as we're about to see the top 16 seed reveal live on social media. Rocco, prior to seeing those 16 hosts, we were talking pre-show, you feel comfortable about 14 teams being host. Last year when we did this show, we said 13. And then we saw two surprises. One, Arizona, who had an RPI of the high 20s, but they did sweep Pac-12 regular season and tournament titles. And then the other one was East Carolina. They had an RPI in the low 20s with an athletic director on the committee. Walk me through kind of what you're expecting in the top 16, maybe a bubble on the top 8 for the super regional advantage to host in the national seed area, and then your bubble around the top 16.
Noah, it's awesome to be back doing this with you again this year. Obviously, it's exciting to kind of see how the committee looks at these teams and makes these decisions and how much influence these members will have on the host picture, which we'll find out here in mere seconds, I guess, and then also the overall 64. But the 14 that I think are pretty clear out of the SEC, Texas, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, and Ole Miss, 8 of the 16, I believe those are all pretty much locked in. As far as, I'd be shocked if any of those 8 are not hosts. And then the other 8, I guess we will start, of course, with North Carolina, who steamrolled the ACC tournament championship game today, followed by Coastal Carolina with their huge win. Those two teams, North Carolina will be a surefire top 8 team. Coastal Carolina, if the committee takes today's result into account, I think has the goods to be a top 8 themselves by tomorrow. That's something we'll learn tomorrow. And then after that, you have both Oregon schools, Oregon and Oregon State, in great shape to host. And I do believe, even though Florida State lost in the semis to that dominant North Carolina team, Florida State's series win over Clemson and Clemson's run to the finals, I think that gets both of them enough to host. So that gives us 14, Noah. And from there, my host bubble, if you will, is down to 4. And you may disagree. You might have another team or two in mind. But I do believe Georgia Tech and Dallas Baptist losing yesterday made it pretty clear that they're going to be number 2 seeds in my view. And I will go ahead and move forward with that committee influencer, Jeremy McClain, the athletic director at Southern Miss, the University of Southern Miss, I should say. And I think that'll be enough to get the Golden Eagles one of the 16 host spots. I believe that was also voted on before today's game, which only helps Southern Miss get a host. And then UCLA, prior to the loss to Nebraska today, UCLA entered the day with a top 10 RPI right as we refreshed the numbers before any action started. And then you also saw they were 14th in the KPI, which is one of the recommended tools that everybody in the committee is looking at. So I thought that was very strong for UCLA. I think the toughest decision overall was to leave the entire Big 12 off of the host list, because the next 2 I was stuck on was either the Big 12 tournament champs, Arizona, who actually has more quad 1 and 2 wins combined than not a lot, but a good chunk of these hosts, as well as that shiny championship right off the top of our brains that we just saw against a very solid TCU team, who TCU by the numbers, they're 13th in the KPI, they're top 18 in the RPI. They have more than enough credentials themselves to be a host. So I do believe the committee woke up today when they made these final votes with 18 solid options. But as you know, Noah, there's only 16 spots. So that's where I've landed, but very curious to see what we got.
Here it is, sharing my screen right now. As last year we had a very, built-in, drama-filled, alphabetical order reveal of these hosts. This year, just one graphic, which, of course, it's anticlimactic. But here are the hosts this year: Georgia, Auburn, Texas, LSU, Chapel Hill, which is North Carolina, Clemson, Coastal Carolina, Oregon State, Oregon, Arkansas, Southern Miss, Tennessee, UCLA, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Florida State. Rocco, out of the 16, what was the record here?
16-0, baby.
There we go.
Every once in a while, every once in a while, a blind squirrel finds a nut, Noah. So yeah, and I think the one shocking element I think that maybe take over the social media reactions will be the Big 12 not getting a host, as I said. But because of the fact that TCU left the door open with the extra innings loss last night, and the fact that Arizona, they had some awesome wins, a great amount quantity-wise of quad 1 and 2 wins to make it happen. They just had a non-conference strength of schedule in the 200s and a fourth place regular season finish. So it wasn't quite what last year's Arizona was able to do, despite the RPI being 31 last year. So, and also, to the point I was making earlier, Noah, I was saying how we had 18 great options this year. I thought last year there was more and more doors opening for a team like Arizona to sneak in and host. This year, the doors stayed pretty closed. I mean, it was really healthy competition for these 16 spots. And based on the process I thought the committee was going through, obviously I don't really have a disagreement.
Yeah, there we go. I guess since you drilled it, kind of as expected here, let's jump into how you had these ranked. We have a Google Doc that you and I both have access to, and I'll begin sharing my screen here for the people. This is what we'll be working on today for the show. Kind of get into the order here. I do think that the number one overall definitely got more interesting as the week went on. Vanderbilt finishes number one in RPI. They win the SEC tournament title. They didn't play any games against Missouri and South Carolina. But you on Bracketeer.org, your website, you still had Texas overall number one. Kind of your thoughts behind that. New conversation, because this wasn't really a thing even a week ago.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult decision as well. I think if Vanderbilt's going to make the move to one, that actually would surprise me less than what I got stuck on, which was Vanderbilt getting thoroughly beat by Arkansas. They didn't play Texas head to head, and once Tennessee upset Texas in Hoover, we never got to see that matchup. So you go, more or less throughout the regular season. Texas, of course, with the 22 wins, which was 3 more than Vanderbilt, I believe, in the regular season. Then the fact that Vanderbilt, not saying they had an easy path to the championship, but they did get Tennessee instead of Texas for the semifinal matchup, and they land with Ole Miss in the final. It wasn't Murderers Row, although those are all great teams. It wasn't Murderers Row for the Commodores to get 3 wins in 3 days in Hoover. They had a double bye. So I just don't think the difference between the start of the week and the end of the week, all Texas did was lose to Tennessee, was quite enough to put them above, in my view. And then you get down to Vanderbilt versus Arkansas, which are my 2 and 3. And I can't get over that head-to-head where Arkansas was the dominant team. And, if the committee went through the same process I did, it's going to be really difficult for them to put them ahead of Arkansas either. Now, you can start digging into several other metrics. You can use that SEC tournament title now to Vanderbilt's to build Vanderbilt's case to get up to the number 2 or number 1 spot. So I won't be absolutely surprised if they get there. But that's just how I did the pecking order. What I will say about Vanderbilt's championship this week, though, Noah, on a positive end, I think it's enough to keep them above North Carolina, despite North Carolina being dominant in the second best league. And North Carolina did not win the regular season by a fraction. They were right there within a game, but they didn't do it. And they did dominate this weekend with some really good wins, beating Florida State and Clemson the last 2 days. But Vanderbilt now comes in the final KPI this morning ahead of Carolina. One of the reasons I like Carolina on Monday was they were actually number 1 in the KPI. And again, we don't know how much the committee cares about the KPI, but we do know it's the only other ranking system that they're officially all looking at. And so I think that helps Vanderbilt be a rock solid top 3.
We got Tyler in the YouTube chat here mentioning that Southern Miss is 90-1 on DraftKings right now, and they are now a regional host. So definitely, if you're playing home baseball in the NCAA tournament, not a bad look there, my friend. Great shout for the show. So I kind of agree with your order here at 13, 14, 15, and 16 down at the end, where I kind of have, just curious about your thoughts. LSU is your 5 seed. Georgia is your 6 seed. LSU currently in RPI 10. Georgia currently RPI 2. I'm just curious of the order there. And then also a little bit more shocking to me was you had the Beavers at Oregon State 12th, and their RPI currently 7th. So this is definitely an interesting conversation for the last 4 super hosts. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think when it comes down to with LSU, Georgia, and Auburn, it got to a point by the end of this week, they were clearly all three belonging in the top 8 from what I, based on some of the other results, knowing that Coastal Carolina had a lot of work to do. They weren't going to be able to get a big win out of their pot of 4 teams in the Sun Belt tournament until the championship game today. So I didn't see any path for Coastal to pass those 3. Then with Oregon, I thought they were already a top 8 at the start of the week based on the fact they played that Oregon State team who was number 6 all week, now number 7 with the most recent RPI update. And they beat that Oregon State team 4 times head to head. So I don't see a world where Oregon's not going to be above Oregon State. That's just too dominant, 4-0 for the season. So some of my thinking there was, all right, now how do I separate LSU, Georgia, and Auburn? And we've got some good head-to-head data there. And, with Georgia sweeping Auburn, it was really difficult to make that leap. And then with some of the head-to-head comparisons, when you put LSU in the mix, even though I know all 3 didn't play each other directly, I think it was pretty clear that LSU belonged above both just based on a lot of that head-to-head. And again, 19-11 was LSU in the SEC. So I think – just listening to a lot of the SEC experts, listening to people who know the league, and also listening to the chairman of the committee who's from the region, Southeastern Louisiana, athletic director Jay Antiguas, maybe our hero of mid-major baseball tomorrow. We'll get to that later. But he knows SEC baseball, and he spoke very intellectually about how the teams are looked at. He's a baseball guy. Some of these other people on the committee are also baseball people. And people respect that LSU team to death. They have a ton of pro prospects. Not saying Auburn and Georgia don't, but I think the 19-11, Georgia goes 18-12, Auburn goes 17-13. Pretty easy to just go 5, 6, 7. So that's how I landed there. And then, like I said earlier, the biggest struggle was, do you take Oregon or Coastal Carolina? And just to kind of finish the part that's all missing here, Coastal Carolina played Clemson twice, beat them both times. So I don't see a world where Clemson vaults above Coastal. And then I did the comparison Clemson, Tennessee. I'm actually okay on either order. I think I might have actually flipped that tonight. But yeah, I think Clemson, Tennessee, and then Oregon State, that would be my 10, 11, 12. And that's where it gets tough because they're all 3 from very different worlds. Clemson coming from a really good ACC season. Tennessee proved themselves with the huge Texas win in Hoover on top of another win. And then you also have Oregon State, who just played a Notre Dame style football style schedule, which ended up yielding them a top 35 schedule and a number 7 overall RPI and a great road record. So, you really can't argue 10, 11, 12 for Oregon State, but I do think Coastal and Oregon did enough to be above those 3.
Awesome. I guess one final question on Oregon State's RPI is there for a reason. They had an incredible road record, and of course, that's baked into that specific metric.
Yeah.
For Beavers fans and also mid-major independent college baseball fans, can you go a little bit, maybe deeper on the Oregon State case of, why they're 12? I mean, behind Oregon, you lost 4 games to the Ducks, which I mean, they're a top 16. That's
it's
a tough case to make. But when you're making a case against like specifically an Auburn who had the 16 SEC wins, a Coastal who they have 2 Sun Belt titles, so that's obviously a positive. Cal Poly just now wins the Big West title, so they are getting an auto bid into the NCAA tournament. Dog piling.
Wow. That's a problem for the Big East. That's a problem for the Big East. But we'll talk. We'll talk about that.
Just, I guess, in a microscope, Oregon State, they fall to 12 when their RPI says they're a top 8 team. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to comparing Oregon State to the Auburns and the Georgias and the LSUs, maybe not LSU because they are above LSU, but assuming you've gone through that LSU, Georgia, Auburn process like I explained first, it's really difficult to put the Beavers above the number 2 and 3 teams. So I think that starts to scoot them down the list. Then you've got the Oregon problem where they're 0-4. Coastal, it's tough to put them above Coastal just due to the fact that, and again, you could argue that you could make that argument because I think the best thing the Beavers have going for them is they played, I'm adding it up here, 32 games that were not in Q1. And in those games, they only lost once in Q3. And they're basically perfect in anything but a Q1 game. That's I think that's the most impressive bullet point. If I was representing Oregon State in the committee room, which nobody was, by the way.
Well, there's the AD from Portland,
that's what I'd
right?
be talking
so,
about.
I mean, is he
maybe
Scott, hey, Oregon State, I'm here. I'll get you this spot, and maybe you get I'll take that AD job in a couple of years. I don't know if there's any kind of impact there or whatnot, but
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Scott's a good friend of mine, actually. He's a great guy. I'm sure he's sticking up for the Beavers and trying to do the right thing there for his in. There's only, 3 or no, well, in college baseball, I think there's only 3 in-state Oregon teams. So him and the two dominant schools. So that might help. But I do think when you go into the fact that they're 11-11 in Q1, and then you're comparing them to just, at that point, I'm down to comparing them to Clemson and Tennessee. Tennessee went 14-11 in Q1. Obviously, they sprinkled in more losses after that. But Tennessee's top end wins. I went through where I ended up with Oregon State. Just let's cut to the chase here. Is I went through the whole season and looked at who they played in series. Obviously, there was a lot of quality, but there was also a lot of teams kind of in that, they had that impressive series out in Des Moines and beat Iowa. Well, now today we know Iowa's not a tournament team. So at the end of the day, how you kind of have to go back and reconcile some of that stuff. Some of the stuff we were impressed with a few weeks ago lost a little bit of its luster by the end. And now that they have the Cal Poly series win, and Cal Poly's in for sure, that certainly helps. But yeah, I'm not going to make a strong argument for them 10, 11, or 12. I just thought with the amount of beef that Clemson had acquired and the amount of beef Tennessee had acquired, just the proof in the pudding, if you will, it was enough for me to assume the actual committee would vote those teams who they get to see all the time. Most of those voting members would be enough to put them above Oregon State. I think Scott Lycombe from Portland, the athletic director, is the only West Coast representative in the entire room. So that's all part of my dynamics of trying to guess this. It's not about my opinion. I think Oregon State's plenty capable of beating a lot of these teams.
Perfect. As you're talking, I'm kind of figuring out which the 4 seeds are going to be, and then we'll get into the field of 64 bubble there. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I need one more. But so last night when I was looking at this thing, this is kind of where I specifically landed. As people can see on the screen, this was my personal from last night. Your last teams in as of this morning: Oklahoma State, UConn, Cal Poly, Troy, and then the first teams out of the field: Virginia, Arizona State, Southeastern Louisiana, Texas A&M, UT Rio Grande, and Xavier. Where I think I might have my first question is, you mentioned it right after Cal Poly dogpiled that the Big East may be in trouble here. UConn yesterday was my last team into the field. UConn yesterday was this morning was one of your last teams in the field. So is this a bad thing for the Huskies and for Xavier Musketeers?
I think it is, and it's a long answer for why, but yeah, we can start with the fact that I like to think about it from the top down. So of course, the best league in baseball is the SEC, no doubt, and I think we can all agree that Texas A&M has become a casualty, even though they got 2 wins in Hoover. So technically, they're up to 13 wins. And one of the biggest things I was talking about the last time we did this was in college sports right now, it's all about the money. Period. End of story. There's no debating that. And so the committee, in my view, is going to do everything they can to get as many SEC teams in as possible. So I'm not writing Texas A&M off. That's why in my blog post today, I said still not dead, because there's a world where they find a way to get them in. But given the fact that 11 regular season wins in the SEC hasn't gotten a team in, no matter what they did in Hoover, besides taking the entire auto bid since 1999, gives the committee kind of a backbone to leave them out. Will they actually do that? We'll find out for sure tomorrow. But that's why it was a little bit easier for me to stomach them out. You might have noticed after their second win this week, I actually had them in for a day. So then you go to the ACC, the second best league. They came into the week hoping that they could find a way for Notre Dame and for Virginia to get in. Well, they both lost to Boston College. So they kind of made that easy to leave them both out. But Florida State's athletic director is on the committee. He's going to fight for Virginia's got an amazing case, especially, I know they're 62nd in the RPI this morning, but they had that tragedy at Florida State, which canceled their 3 most important RPI games of the season. And nobody's going to know that story better than Florida State's athletic director. So who's on the committee? So you can't write Virginia off. And the way he approached the week was, how do I get these 2 bubble teams in? Is he going to be okay with losing them both? We got to wait and see how that plays out. And those are the 2 most powerful leagues. Then you go to the Big 12. The Big 12 had, an amazing finish to the regular season that allowed what I call the middle to beat up on the top. Kind of, which is why you saw no Big 12 hosts announced today. So with Oklahoma State and Cincinnati emerging as tournament level teams, I think that's really bad news for Arizona State, because I think somebody's got to go in the Big 12, and Oklahoma State swept Arizona State to end the year. Then ASU shows up in Arlington, Noah, and loses to BYU, the last team that qualified for that tournament. So just an awful final impression for the Sun Devils. I know it's brutal to stomach this because they went 18-12 in the conference schedule, but I just think that's going to be too much and too easy to parse apart, especially since in baseball they do seem to care how you finish. And nobody finished worse than Arizona State. So then you get into the mid-majors, right? So with the mid-majors, Troy, I think their most solid case all year, and I really do, if we're looking at these teams equitably and as independent entities, which is how we're supposed to do it and how the rules and the policies read we're supposed to do this, then Troy, I don't see how you could leave them out. They won every series until getting swept by Southern Miss, and I get it. They lost again to Southern Miss. So they go 0-4 against that one team, but they did get a series win over dominant Coastal Carolina, who's got a great chance now to be a top 8 seed tomorrow. They had a game at Mississippi State this year that they won, who's also a SEC level tournament team, beat them on the road. And they schedule out of conference RPI. That's a fun stat to look at, and the committee has access to. Troy is number 14 in the country, and that's extremely amazing. So then you get over to the Big East, and now you're down to UConn or Xavier. There's totally different reasons to like both. Xavier had a top 4 schedule in the nation, scheduled everybody, played everybody, picked up some great wins. They split 2 games with Oregon. I think that might be the most impressive thing they did out of the league. But through a whole Big East schedule where there's not that many teams and, for the most part, everything was even, they finished 3 full games behind UConn and 5 head-to-head matchups. They did go 3-2 against UConn, but I don't know if that's enough to overcome finishing 3 games below them in the standings. So then with UConn, I like their case a lot because they've won at Miami. They played one-off games against Vanderbilt and at North Carolina, two of the best 4 teams in the country, Noah, and they beat them. So I'm down. For me, that last spot is UConn or Troy, and I feel gutted for either one of them. I think there's hope for both because, again, I don't want to get down in the weeds of any kind of like conspiracies, but there has been baseball committees in the past where they've been known to do some horse trading. Now that we know that the Sun Belt got 2 hosts, do they trade that horse for leaving Troy out? I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody to trade because one of the other big factors is the Big East does not have any employees on the committee this year. And that could be disaster, as we saw with the CAA last year, who had 3 deserving teams and only 1 got in. This year, Big East, 3 deserving teams, and maybe only Creighton gets in.
I thought, honestly, a couple of days ago, Creighton winning the league would have been like best case scenario because they had the lowest RPI. Then you would at least get 2 and then possibly be able to make a case for, that 3rd team. But Rocco, I think the other fascinating thing here is the chairman of this year's committee does happen to be the athletic director of Southeastern, J.R. Teagues. And there's 2 teams from the Southland on this bubble. UT Rio Grande has the noticeably better RPI. They are currently at the latest update 43, whereas Southeastern is 54. Yeah. The Lions own a series victory over Rio Grande and have the representation. If it comes down to those 2 in any sort of order, I automatically think that Southeastern is going to be above the Vaqueros, no matter how you cut it. Southeastern had the regular season title split with Rio Grande, but Southeastern was the number 1 seed in that conference. Can you talk about, your viewpoint on what's the likelihood, possibility that we could see a Southeastern or even a 13-20 SEC Texas A&M team get in off the bubble? Both of those teams in the 50s in RPI currently. They're on the outside looking in right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely possible, especially in this sport. In basketball too, to a degree. We saw what happened with North Carolina. I don't think that was as crazy as the attention it got, but this would actually be a little crazy to take a team like Southeastern who had can't forget, Noah, like they had and I'm just double checking it before I say it out loud, 252nd ranked non-conference strength of schedule. So, one of the things the committee was able to pump their chest about last year was those last 4 teams that got in, even though they were all, I think they were all committee member teams, which was insane. I think it was Indiana, Kansas State, Coastal,
Florida and Kansas State weren't listed on that last 4 in graphic. They were even even more comfortably in, which is even more like, just shady. Right. But
yeah. But at least with those 4, though, directly, they were able to say they all had a top 40 non-conference strength of schedule, and you couldn't argue that. SELA is like way out of bounds with this schedule. I think there's barely over 300 teams in baseball, so they're bottom 50 essentially in scheduling. And they don't really have that big of an excuse because in baseball, teams aren't really afraid to play each other. You're in a great region to get games with Texas teams, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, et cetera, right? So, that's a tough one to swallow for SELA. But at the same time, last year's chairman was Coastal's AD, and he was on his way out. Also a former baseball guy, I believe. And, man, I just and then you start digging in
the Coastal thing too. Real quick, the coach was his final year, so they got him into the NCAA tournament.
It was the coach's final year. Yeah, and then but it was Matt Hogue's last year on the committee as well, the AD, right? So this year, it's a little bit of a combo because J.R. Teagues, am I saying that right?
Artigues, one of the 2.
Artigues, I've heard that. Okay, I want to get that right. So J.R. Teagues, I've been researching him all week because I think this is the most.
I saw you write about it in one of your articles this week. It was great.
Yeah, so not only is he the athletic director at Southeastern Louisiana, but he's also the 8-9 year former coach. He also owns a massive training facility for baseball and softball prospects and all ages for kids that recruits come from. So he has influence on a bunch of these baseball and softball players going to the SEC, the ACC. He probably knows people at basically in every conference given all the involvement he has. He is a very well connected baseball guy on all levels, from kids through his former work, through his current work as an AD, to being on this committee now, I believe, for 5 years. And he saw what Coastal was able to pull off last year. So if he helped enable that last year, isn't it time for the rest of the committee to pay his Lions a favor this year? That's where the case is made. And if anybody wants to call it anything other than that, they're lying to themselves. But when you see Southeast Louisiana announced tomorrow, please remember this podcast.
Yes, definitely. The final team on the bubble that I just want to get your thoughts on real quick before we start slotting these teams into some regionals and having some real fun here is Kentucky. 13 SEC wins, quad 1 and quad 2 record, not pretty. And we're really not talking about them really sweating it out on Selection Monday. Is it the 13 win rule? I mean, it is under 50% for those SEC 13 team or 13 win teams. But how confident are we in that Kentucky really is kind of, a shoe in right now?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't love it because I think you could pick them apart and leave them out in a lot of ways. I mean, they're 8-19 in quad 1, and for an SEC team to lose 4 games outside of the top 2 quads is, those are stubbing your toe type of games with the talent gap you typically have against quad 3 and quad 4 level programs. But the reality is, like I said, with Texas, I was even concerned leaving Texas A&M out because all the consolidation and power is going to this Southeastern Conference, and they are the dominant conference in baseball. To see them not get one of their teams in that did everything they need to do with 13 regular season wins is way too much for me to gamble on. The whole point of my forecast is to be accurate. So, I'm definitely putting my chips on the table on Kentucky getting in based on just those basic facts.
So as I'm filling this out right now, it's live. I mean, we're doing a live show currently. Cal Poly stole a bid just recently, so that's kind of adjusted the number. But we also saw a stolen bid earlier today of Nebraska, and the AAC stole a bid, and then the Conference USA stole a bid. All of that happened within the last 48 hours. The bubble is shrinking a little bit, even from the time that you did your morning bracketology. Rocco, I think based off of everything that I was pulling from how you were describing this, we're looking at Oklahoma State, Miami, Xavier, UConn, Virginia, and Arizona State or USC. Is that who's the last team in this final spot here? Because Cal Poly has the auto. They're in this list. Louisville, Cincinnati, Mississippi State, Kentucky, all mid-30s RPI. They probably get in comfortably with 500 or above records in the SEC. ACC, Cincinnati had a good finish in the Big 12. The last spot here is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so where are we at here? Because I have both Oklahoma State and Miami in still. So I'm wondering if there's a team missing, or maybe there's maybe there's a duplicate or something.
Possibly could be 1,000%. I could have screwed this up.
No, it's no problem. I just want to make sure we get it right. But like for me in the 3 seed range, I'll just start with the auto bids. I have going to 3 seeds. So that would be East Carolina and Nebraska. Congrats. They both won today, along with Cal Poly and East Tennessee State also won today. I'm assuming Stetson, but they have work to do as the last cliffhanger conference. And then Western Kentucky, congrats to them. Creighton and Rhode Island from yesterday. So that would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the 3 seeds. So you have 8 more to grab. And so then my next 8 would be Kentucky, USC, Cincinnati,
USC,
Mississippi State, Miami. Yes.
Ooh. Okay. I had them out yesterday, so I'll be interested on your case for the Trojans there.
Oh, okay. We got some fun coming.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So the 8 that were not conference champions, so basically these would be the last 8 in at this moment. Well, I haven't decided on Troy, UConn, or Southeast Louisiana, so let's just say 7. Kentucky, USC, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Miami, Kansas State. So 7 of the 8 spots to those, with probably my final decision being Troy, UConn, or SELA. So out for me, just to review, would be Virginia, Arizona State, Texas A&M, UT, RGV, and Xavier. They would kind of be in the for sure out. And then Troy, UConn, or SELA for the last spot.
Okay.
Are we off still?
I'm following here a little bit and trying to adjust to the sheet. Troy, UConn, or the other team was who for the final spot?
SELA. Of course.
I mean,
we're not giving up on the Lions.
So we're leaving Xavier out. I kind of like Xavier, like comparing Xavier to UConn. I like Xavier a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think that
I'm not gonna fight that too hard, because I do think the room could be torn on that based on
Xavier's got the higher RPI. They've got the head-to-head record over UConn.
They're very different profiles. But I think again, it just depends. Like, every committee could be different on this, but I think the 3-game lead in the conference standings, 17 wins versus 14 wins.
But this is correct though. Like, because of the shrinking bubble with the stolen bids, we have 1 spot for these remaining teams.
Well, I'm trying to. I need to be able to zoom in on this somehow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you want to zoom in a little bit more? Just a couple more. Just on that middle column is all we need. Okay, so you've got Cal Poly in, which I'm pretty sure I did. Yes. We're good on 4 seeds. Yeah. Louisville, Cincinnati, and the one on the left is your 2 seeds, correct?
These are the 2s.
Oh, you have Fairfield a 3. I have them a 4. And then I think...
Did I duplicate any 4s to screw this up somehow? Very well could have.
I'm checking. Yeah. But either way, we should have if Oklahoma State's out right now, you should have 2 spots. You should have 3, actually.
How did I screw this up so bad?
I think you're fine. Yeah, I'm not able to really catch it just by eyeballing.
Neither am I.
If you want, I can share. Would it help if I shared mine?
If you want to. I just the Cal Poly win put them like in the field, I guess. Nebraska winning today also shrunk your field by 1.
Yep. So out of that list, I've got 8 auto bids, and I think you have 9 because you have Fairfield. So on my 4 seeds, I think my best team is Columbia, and now I had to move Houston Christian into the 4 seeds. I had them as a 3 this morning, and then the 8 and the 3 seeds: Rhode Island, Creighton, Western Kentucky. You with me so far?
Rhode Island, Creighton, WKU. Yep.
Stetson, ETSU, Cal Poly. Yep. Nebraska, East Carolina.
Boom.
Okay, so those are the 8 autos. If you want to move Fairfield over to the 4s, just as a placeholder, we'll go through the 4s next. But the 3s, I still have Kentucky and USC, which you just have Kentucky.
Oh,
then I also
so here's the issue. I'm an idiot. So this is 16. I originally had 15 in the columns. So that's how
there we go. So we're good. Yeah. I knew it was something. All right. Well, we might need one more spot still, but we'll go through it anyway.
Yeah, we do need one more spot.
But you should have
one of these teams is now a 2 in this column. So yeah, I royally screwed that up.
And if you want to save time, you can just put Louisville as a 2. I think that's where I landed. If you want to just
they were all right in the KPI. I remember checking them. Alrighty. Yep. So 4 teams.
Now you've got 4. All right. Well, I've got Oak State and Miami in. So if you and USC. So if you want to save USC to debate them,
my thing with USC is that now I had them out last night, but now you have a Nebraska team who's representing the Big Ten and may have taken one of those ghost bids for each conference, right? But also, I'm looking at USC, and they have the 8 Q3 and Q4 losses, the borderline 100 top 100 non-conference strength of schedule. And then when I went through and pulled performance in these series, their best series win was UCLA, and they really didn't have another impressive win to me. Maybe I'm grasping, but I even had pulled their record against the field as of yesterday, I believe. So maybe I have that, maybe I don't. But I guess maybe your case for USC is.
Well, the Q1 and Q2 combo was pretty dominant compared to a lot of the other options, especially when I was looking at your Troys, UConns, and Cal Polys of the world. But now Cal Poly's out of the conversation. The UCLA series win was at home, but that's a better series win than UConn has, for example. And so some of it's just comparing apples to apples. Now, I hear you when you say they played Oregon and went 0-3. They've got a crack at UC Irvine, lost. They did win on the road at Arizona State, who is a fellow bubble friend, an old conference friend. They also lost a UCLA game that was part of the Southern California College Baseball Classic, so they actually went 2-2. But they also beat Vandy and UConn head-to-head in that same event. So now you've got to win over the SEC tournament champions on your resume. They also they did have a road Irvine win early. So I think all that's a little bit more weight than at least the mid-major hopefuls have. When I'm saying that, I'm really just focused on Troy and UConn at this point, and I'm assuming that's true with SELA as well. And I also thought, from talking to the Big Ten and listening to a lot of stuff in the preseason, there's a huge initiative to get this league to 5 bids. And I think that's going to be a huge deal for the Indiana AD, who's still on the committee. I think they really wanted that bid steal to get to 4 this weekend. They got it. And I just think USC's done enough on a national level with some of those wins I mentioned to not get snubbed. But could be wrong, been wrong before. But I like their case a little better than some of the others.
All right, so USC is in. I apologize. I had to sneeze for any audio listeners out there. So now we've got one spot for the two Big East teams, Xavier and UConn, and then Virginia. I had a very hard time leaving Virginia out. I had them in my field, the 16 ACC wins plus like the committee. I watched Artigues talk on the D1 baseball show saying that they are going to take into the account that Virginia would have played 3 games against Florida State, a top 15 RPI team. That would have helped. I had Virginia in. And is this the case where you're talking about the Big East may possibly get squeezed?
Hey, that's just one example of it. Do we have Troy out still as
Troy's
well?
Out as well.
Yeah. So they could get squeezed that way. They could get squeezed by Sela. Sela could squeeze all these teams. So, I think, but you're, if you want to go back to kind of the top of the sport, and I think that's, if I'm a Virginia fan, that's the thing I'm holding on to the most, is that we're the second best league. We came into the week with 2 bubble teams. Virginia I felt probably 70 or so % about Virginia. But again, the one thing you wanted to avoid was a loss to a non-tournament team, and both them and Notre Dame did that. So that plummeted the RPI back into the 60s, which is where they're at now. And it's tough. It's tough to reach even lower, knowing that the chairman has a team at 54. And then you've got the Xavier UConn problem is mainly not that they don't both belong. I think there's a world where they both belong, actually. But you have to decide one or the other, because they're not getting both. And you and I don't even agree on that. so then based on your decision on that conversation, then you got to stack that winner of Xavier UConn in the room against a couple other bubble teams like Troy, like Virginia, like potentially Sela, or even UTRGV if somehow they won the argument over Sela. And I don't know, man. It's tough. But I think I think all that chaos helps Virginia, because maybe it's just like, all right, screw all these mid-majors. Let's just take Virginia and be done with it. It's a fascinating dynamic.
So, of the 3 teams, who's your choice?
As crazy as it sounds, I might take Sela tomorrow when I wake up.
All right.
Yeah, but I think Troy. I think the most deserving team is Troy.
Okay.
I honestly do.
All
right. I don't think they did anything wrong this year, and they proved themselves by beating Coastal Carolina in a series. They held their own against most of the SEC teams they played. They narrowly almost beat Auburn on the road, and whatever. Those are 1-game samples, but usually a mid-major team like Troy, with all the tests they get, Sunbelt's a good league. They never stubbed their toe once, so I feel like they've earned it.
The Southern Miss AD must have done some incredible horse trading there, for sure.
To get 2 hosts and a bubble team.
Yeah.
He'll be the big winner for sure if Troy's the last team in. But that's why I also start to doubt Troy getting in. And anyway, we could go on and on in circles on this. But I would say Troy, Virginia, and Sela all have still reasons for hope, and whoever won the UConn Xavier comparison has reason for hope, and that's where we're at.
All righty. As you were talking about the bubble, and we were deciding who we were getting in, and I started to fill in some of the 4 seeds here. And if you want to help me out now, go ahead.
Sure.
And I'll get this out of the. Oh shoot! What did I just do? I'll get this up here, and then we can do this. All right.
Okay. Well, one of the helpful exercises that I've been able to kind of bank on through the 4-seed process, especially, is the bus ride rule. So if you qualify within 400 miles of a bus ride. Some of these teams have multiple options. Like Murray State's got 4 or 5, right? So with Murray State being a top 100 team now, I've got them going to Ole Miss, where they qualify within 400 miles. St. Mary's qualifies for UCLA. So since we have UCLA, that's a nice one.
USC upstate's got to be Clemson, right?
Yep, Clemson. Yep, I like that one. Bethune-Cookman's a slam dunk for Florida State. Done the investigation on that. And then I think, who's the other one? Wright State with Vanderbilt, actually.
That's a stronger
they could go,
but yeah, that's definitely regional.
Well, yeah, and I can explain that a little bit. So Miami, Ohio is also in the mix, and they're low 80s now with the MAC title. And so I think Miami, Ohio ends up in Knoxville where they qualify within the 400 bus ride miles. And then that's going to push Wright State, even though they are also strong, I think, to Vanderbilt. Also, you had the Wright State not too long ago had that dramatic loss at Tennessee Regional. And so they don't want to go back there. So we got to get them to Vanderbilt this year. Yes, got to get them to Vanderbilt. So that helps narrow it down a little bit. Then you have Houston Christian, who qualifies for both Texas and for LSU.
All right.
So I've been sticking them at LSU, but now we have Little Rock, who I think because the RPI is so terrible, probably just stick them in Arkansas. And so then you got to decide on Houston Christian if you want to send them to LSU. Or
my only pull from your bracketology from this morning, you had Holy Cross in Auburn. They played each other this year in a series, so I would say like that's where I stuck like CCSU in the Auburn regional. So maybe Holy Cross gets sent to like an LSU or
I would just flip those. I would flip those. So basically starting with Fairfield, actually starting with Columbia. So I had Columbia in this order of strength, and you could argue Columbia or Fairfield, who's stronger. But Columbia, Fairfield, Holy Cross, Central Connecticut. So those being the 3 and 4, you could flip them between Auburn and LSU. Then I had Binghamton or Bryant. And did we get a winner there yet Binghamton for the final game? Oh, let's go. Bearcats are in. So then definitely Binghamton going to Chapel Hill, I believe. And then that would leave Utah Valley to go to Austin, that's how I landed with Houston Christian probably going to LSU now, actually. So I'm going to have to rearrange some of this because now you need a team at Southern Miss, right?
Yeah, I slotted in Columbia, one of your stronger fours.
Yeah, that's good.
A lower one.
Okay, and then you could shift Fairfield to Oregon State.
All right.
And that would give us Holy Cross to Oregon.
Holy Cross to Oregon. I had Fresno State there. I slotted them there to keep them west.
Yeah, let's do that.
And I put Holy Cross in Coastal, if that works.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
Do you want to do the twos or threes?
You're reading that
first.
Oh, we done with the fours now? Okay, I'll figure the rest out in the morning. I was looking at mine. Okay, so with the twos, I think it's a slam dunk for Irvine to go to UCLA.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And then, just going down the RPI list, kind of the way I like to do it. Also, you have to consider committee influence with Southern Miss. I just think Alabama ends up there. But I'll take arguments if you want to put an ACC team like Georgia Tech there instead.
No, I think the Alabama's got the highest RPI of teams that aren't hosting. They'll get sent to the mid-major host.
Yes, even though he's on the committee. And then Northeastern, I parked them on the side because they're going to have to travel regardless.
Yep. One of the TCU DBU
Georgia
teams are probably traveling as well because UTSA probably ends up in Texas.
Yep. Correct. UTSA in Texas. And I also think Kansas for Arkansas just makes too much sense. It's the only place they really qualify.
I agree.
With the 400 rule, even though they have money. But I like Georgia. I like Georgia Tech with Ole Miss in that case.
Okay.
Because Ole Miss will be one of the last 4 hosts, I believe, and Georgia Tech's right there when they were on the hosting bubble most of the week. And that led me to send TCU to the Beavers.
That makes a lot of sense. I was kind of landing on them heading west for the most part. I know their head coach, Kirk Carlos, is not happy about it.
It happens. It happens to the best of us. For whatever reason, I've just, especially with Scott Strickland on the committee, and Coastal had to go the distance this week. I like Florida to go to Coastal, regardless of if they're top 8 or not. And I think the Gators would still feel, let's say Coastal finishes in the 8 seed. If Florida goes and wins that regional, then they're in position to be in an 8-9 super regional and almost optimizing their opportunities for Omaha that way instead of going to a lower, like a 13.
And the way that you have it set up right now, too, by the way, if Florida was to win that Coastal Regional, they would then head back to Clemson for a second straight super. And Sully and Backage have great history. They were on the former Clemson staff of the early 2000s. So,
So yeah, I've just been sticking with that throughout the week here.
Oklahoma is a team that I think like you leave them to the side, but they're definitely getting sent to the East Coast. I thought the Atlantic Coast. So
yeah, I ended up with them at the Clemson Regional today.
Makes a lot of
sense.
I
think I'll probably stick with that. And I think because Wake Forest to Tennessee makes a lot of sense.
They scrimmage each other in the fall every year too. So
okay, and they played in the Omaha a couple years ago. Remember that game? You could always swap Wake with NC State if you really wanted to send NC State to Tennessee. But I do think NC State did have more.
ACC you said Wake
wins,
to
but
Tennessee.
Wake's got the better.
My fault. My apologies. I thought you said Vanderbilt. But yeah, that makes sense.
Oh no. Actually, we could go to Vanderbilt next because I think Louisville's if they're going to be one of the last 2s, they're a shoe-in for Vanderbilt.
I agree.
And I did the homework on this. I've done the homework on this. They haven't played
in a regional a while.
Vanderbilt regional,
but they're rivals.
In a long
Can I pitch Wake Forest possibly somewhere else? West Virginia is a really good partner for Tennessee, right? With travel.
Yeah. But I have West Virginia qualifies for UNC as well.
Well, they played each other in the Super last year. I could definitely see the committee doing that, but also
Sure. Also forgetting. They forget a lot too.
That was one of the better Super Regionals last year. I would be very surprised if they get matched up and pinned up against each other, but sign me up for it if it does happen. I was landing with Oklahoma, honestly, to North Carolina a lot.
Yeah, that works.
And then Wake Forest, they can go to Georgia, right? That's drivable.
Yes.
And then
we got to find a home Tennessee. For Duke then.
Okay, so Duke's the odd man out here. They go to Auburn. Can they drive to Auburn?
I have NC State with Auburn. Where do you have NC State?
Yeah, it was between NC State, Auburn, and I had one of these in the Oregon Regional yesterday, I believe. No, I didn't. I had NC State at Vandy, and I had Oklahoma, UNC. I had Duke, Georgia, and I had I had them as a 3, Louisville as a 3 yesterday. So,
yeah,
okay.
Well, Duke, I think neither Duke or NC State qualify for Auburn. They're 500 miles away, but
so Wake
they're pretty
could go to
natural to
Auburn.
Send one of them. Any of them could. They're all not qualifiers because they're from the same part of North Carolina. But Wake, any of them will qualify for Georgia.
Gotcha.
So whoever you think is probably the highest of those 3, which
strongest,
or
weakest,
probably the strongest because I'd say the strongest because they would want to play closer to home.
I would probably say that's
maybe Duke. Maybe Duke cares the least though because I feel like NC State and Wake Forest fans are much more likely
I will
to travel.
Committees probably don't care, but Duke got sent west last year, so they probably would.
They went to Oklahoma, didn't they? Or no, they played
went to
Oklahoma
yeah.
in. Yep. Was that it? Okay. So what does that leave you
we've
with?
got 2 ACC teams with 3 non-ACC hosts, so got to find a home first for Wake and NC State. We've got Oregon, Auburn, and LSU.
Well, Wake lost to Cal in the ACC tournament, so if somebody has to go to Oregon, it should maybe be them. If you have to send one of them that far,
I was actually doing like DBU, TCU as possible, like head out west, but Wake makes sense too.
Okay, I threw DBU at LSU.
Okay. That makes they can
obviously
make that
drive. It was barely above 400. It was like 410.
So Wake to Oregon. Arizona or Northeastern to Florida State here?
I like Northeastern to Florida State.
Committee giving himself a mid-major. And then
well, I think Arizona, I had Arizona with Oregon. I thought that was a little bit more of a reward. And you could send them to either Oregon. I just thought with Arizona it'd be a little easier to go to Eugene.
Me throwing a curveball, and I think I vetoed and sent Oklahoma to UNC. Possibly, is that where I don't know. We've got 3 ACC hosts or 3 ACC 2s all in North Carolina, so one of them is probably going to get screwed.
There's a chance, it all comes down to your big West Virginia decision. Because if West Virginia does go to North Carolina, then everything works a little bit more seamlessly, which is what I had. But once you take West Virginia out and you put them with an SEC team, then you run into some ACC problems because North Carolina needs a different opponent, which is where Oklahoma makes a lot of sense. But after Oklahoma, that's your last SEC option. And you don't have a Big 12 option, so you'd have to either take Northeastern or North Carolina or Oklahoma, probably.
Yeah.
But at this point, let's just stick with what we got and build on it. But I think just based on Florida State being one of the lower ranked hosts and Northeastern being nearly perfect all year, that's a pretty fair matchup 1-2. Like if you're trying to balance these regionals out at all, which they say they try to do.
All right, so 3 seeds. What are your slam dunks here for regional pairings?
Yeah. Well, if we have Northeastern in Tallahassee, I think it's a quick slam dunk to throw Mississippi State, who qualifies in the 400 rule for Tallahassee. It's also, they've been there before, but it's been a bunch of different NCAA tournaments since then, so they're going to be ready to go back based on that. Then let's see, Cal Poly as champions, probably want to reward them. I threw them in Corvallis with TCU. Then with some of the struggles, well, actually, let me just jump to Stetson.
Yes.
Because I'm assuming Stetson wins tonight. But Stetson's already done the Florida State thing. They were there last year. So the only other qualifier, if you can believe it, they didn't even qualify for Coastal within the mileage, but they qualify for Auburn. So I like Stetson to go to Auburn due to that. Plus, a lot of other teams can't qualify for Auburn. Then I think it's also easy to throw Creighton in Arkansas.
By the way, this is off topic. Not sure if you know it, but Stetson was my mid-major Omaha 8 prediction, and I love
Let's go.
I love the Auburn 1 seed just for that prediction. I think that's a 1 seed that they could be able to compete with.
Well, hey, well, now you know they're like exactly 400 miles from
perfect.
Auburn.
Yeah, because I was kind of
I like typed in like baseball field to baseball field, and it was almost exactly 400.
So Cincinnati is really close to Vanderbilt. Is Vandy going to get 3 power schools though?
Well, Cincinnati, yeah. Well, I think Cincinnati's. Well, now, with you putting West Virginia, I can't do that anymore. I had them going to Knoxville, so obviously can't do that. And I think they're only going to qualify for Nashville, so you might be stuck with
Gotcha.
that.
Is Western Kentucky a Vandy qualifier?
Yeah, I've got WKU going to Vandy. That's pretty close, actually. I've driven that personally. Then I think it gets interesting with East Carolina. I think they can go to Coastal. I have to double check.
They could.
Have they been together?
Yeah, I think ESU and Coastal were in a regional in 2022 or 2023, one of those 2 years. They could be a mid-major in the North Carolina-Oklahoma regional.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. And since they should kind of go up the totem pole a little bit. I like that. Let's go with that.
I know it's not
okay, and that gives us.
I know it's not Nashville, but Cincinnati could do Knoxville too, right?
Right, but if you have West Virginia there, you can't have 2 Big 12s.
I'm an idiot, but I was looking at that. I was like, that's a rivalry. That's perfect. So the 2-3 didn't even click to me.
Well, that's what I had. So mine has Tennessee, Wake, and Cincy, but I might revise based on your super regional intel from last year. Okay, then you get into a situation where Rhode Island starts to stick out like a sore thumb, and I felt like, just cutting to the chase, looking at the list of teams, you just stick them in the hardest regional, which is Texas.
Makes a lot of sense.
So they'd open up.
Plus, it's Texas with 2 mid-majors. Makes total sense.
Yeah, it's fun for them. Let them go to Austin, and they get some barbecue down there. I also thought with USC getting in, putting them with Oregon, assuming Cal Poly's with Oregon State, putting USC with Oregon makes a lot of. Oh, actually, they can't. That's stupid. You would have to flip those.
Okay.
So USC to Oregon State, and then Cal Poly to Oregon, due to the fact that, of course, they're both in the Big Ten, Ducks and Trojans. So I'm going to make that change on mine as well. East Tennessee State has climbed the RPI ladder like no other, and they are in the mid-30s now.
They're strong.
And they qualify. Who do you have with Clemson?
No, nobody. Now? Just Clemson, Arizona. So they could be a mid-major in that regional.
Yeah, they're actually only like 150 miles from Clemson.
I was looking at
I went
Troy because the obvious regional partner every single year for Troy is Auburn, and we have Stetson in Auburn. So Troy could go to Georgia.
Yeah, so go Georgia. Yeah, Georgia's perfect. Especially if you have an ACC, then you throw in the mid-major behind that. Okay, and then there is Kansas State. The theory there has been they're going to end up in LA.
That's Ben Upton's theory. I love
it. we both agreed on that.
AD on the committee wants an LA vacation, 1 weekend in LA.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful.
It's so big brain. It's actually it works.
It does. And then I think with Miami, it makes sense to put them with the Southern Miss Alabama.
Okay. Yeah, that works. My nomination here is Nebraska to LSU. We just saw it in softball. Nebraska LSU regional.
Yeah.
And there's a mid-major too. So Nebraska would be a power conference 3 in Baton Rouge, or it could be Oklahoma State.
I've got Oklahoma State with Ole Miss just because they're a little stronger.
Okay. Well, we have. Oh shoot! Did I screw that up? Yeah, I did. Okay. I put USC one slot too low. So then Nebraska to LSU, I think, makes some sense.
Yeah, we can always switch it around if it doesn't work at the end.
And then
but
Kentucky would. Oh yeah, it does not work because
Kentucky keeps having to go to Oregon for me because of the fact that they you have to look at the ones and twos, and if they have an SEC in there, you obviously can't send them there. So just go from the bottom up and put them in the first one you see. But usually it's an Oregon team. And
we've got Cal Poly there, and USC.
And then we could adjust Cal Poly. Yeah, USC would be more likely to go somewhere else. So if you want to take USC out for now and put Kentucky there.
Yeah. It's probably
so
how it works because they would be one of the at least in my opinion, they're probably one of the last teams in. So they probably get sent to a stronger host. I would like to think.
Right. Yeah, like for example, today I ended up with USC going to Conway to play Florida, which I could see happening. They've sent Pac-12 teams there over the years to Conway. Washington actually won that regional one year. That 2018 year for sure. Go Dogs.
The way we have to do it right now is Cincinnati's the last team here, and we've got Dub V in Tennessee. Okay. So Cincy would land in Coastal and USC in Knoxville.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. And honestly, if we finagled it a little bit, we could probably make it a little more perfect. But in the interest of time, we'll make sure this is a clean bracket with a good representation of how the process works, especially with I think the thing we wanted to share with viewers is just the fact that this 400 bus rule will take away a lot of the team's options and flexibility. Combine that with the last 2 appearances for each team, trying to make sure they don't go back to the same place again, at least in the last 2 tournaments. And once you get past that, then it's kind of a free-for-all, and you could end up somewhere totally random, which is what you're looking at most likely with Kentucky for sure, just based on the SEC math, and then probably a few others as well. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I always find that to be the most fun part about it. I know, like in basketball and baseball bracketology episodes, like not a lot of people actually show the bracketing and like where the teams get slotted into the regionals. Never. And I think it's the most fascinating part about it. So I appreciate you spending some time with us, Rocco, and on the show. And to recap our top 16, currently all these bids are cemented in. Texas, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, North Carolina, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Coastal Carolina all have received hosts. However, we've slotted them in that respective order inside the top 8. And then Clemson, Tennessee, Oregon State, Ole Miss, Florida State, Southern Miss, and UCLA is kind of how Rocco has guided me in rounding out the top 16 as he drilled all 16 of these hosts pre-show. And the bubble is very fascinating as it shrank by 2. Oh my God, Rocco, due to
what do we got?
Nonstop weather and everything, Stetson has been declared the automatic qualifier out of the Atlantic Sun Conference.
That is total nonsense. They can't drive up to wherever there's no rain and go play somewhere else. That's nonsense.
Florida Gulf Coast was winning that game. They were up 6-5.
I know. How are you going to do that to a team? See, if you can give away, and it's maybe it's an indictment on the sport a little bit, but if you can give away an auto bid based on something like that, don't you think there's a world where Southeastern Louisiana hears their name tomorrow, Noah?
That world is.
I think I think now that I went 16-0 on the hosts, I'm just gonna put CeeLo in the bracket because I got nothing to lose now. I'm playing with house money.
You are my friend. Oh my God, I cannot believe Stetson got the bid like that. That's brutal. So like I would hate to be Florida Gulf Coast. My goodness. They threw their ace in that game too. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
but
I'd be furious if
me
I was on
too.
that team. I don't even know how to put that
Stetson
into words.
hosts that tournament every year. They already have the advantage. That's crazy.
Plus, Gulf Coast battled hard through the losers.
Yeah, they're playing their 6th, 7th games possibly today.
They beat a super good Austin P team to get to that opportunity.
Man, that's crazy.
That's heartbreaking stuff. It's really
that's one way to end the episode. The bubble for the audio listeners: Kentucky, USC, Cincinnati, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Miami, USC, and Troy on the right side of it currently as we see it. On the wrong side of the bubble is Virginia, UConn, Xavier, Southeastern, even though Rocco seems to be, getting even more bullish and brave to put the Lions into the field. Virginia, Arizona State, Texas A&M, and Rio Grande. Rocco, I thank you for your time. You are over there doing great work at Bracketeer.org. You're going to have another piece out there prior to selection show on Monday at noon Eastern. So it's 9 a.m. your time. I know you're going to be up bright and early. Go ahead and plug anything that you need to. Where can the people follow you? Where can they see your work nonstop? Once this winds down tomorrow on the college baseball side, you're revving it up. And you haven't really stopped for college basketball. So explain kind of what you're going to be doing over the next 5 months and then in the off season, and then what your typical day is like.
Thanks, Noah. I appreciate it once again. This is awesome. So fun to go through the exercise and kind of, when you're doing it on your own, you get in your own head on a lot of these decisions. So just talking through is exactly why the committee does it this way. But I appreciate you having me on. Over at Bracketeer.org, obviously we're college basketball first website that focuses on college basketball bracketology, the ever popular subject of that. And, what I've done over the last 2 decades is not only forecast the NCAA tournament, but built out a platform to where covering all 31 leagues now. We lost the Pac-12 last year, RIP, but coming back in 26. And, I'm on the road throughout the season covering as many leagues as possible, and all in an effort to tell the story of each of these leagues and then what it means later for the NCAA tournament, which everybody loves to watch. And here in the offseason, the next 5 months, and what I've done over the last handful of years is built out a consulting business to meet with each of the 31 leagues, the different teams within those leagues on how to build their non-conference schedules based on all types of scenarios. It started with the very simple premise of helping teams build a good schedule so they could get into conversations like this in basketball and be on the bubble and give themselves opportunities to be selected. But as the sport has changed due to money and leagues like the SEC taking 14 bids, it's more just about survival and how to win 20 games and figure out ways to get wins. So there's a lot of strategy, and I understand it kind of from low major all the way to high major. So it's a never ending puzzle from that point of view. But we try to do our best through Twitter, Blue Sky, all the different vehicles. Bracketeer.org is the website. And starting next month, we'll have a page starting with the best leagues on down, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, Big East, and on down, with each team's breakdown of their non-conference schedule. There's a lot of information on there, at least in the spring and summer, that is not public. So it's a great place to check your favorite team, what's going on with the schedule, if that's something you're interested in. And other than that, if you like the work we're doing, we're obviously doing baseball projections here in May. There's a support button at the top. Feel free to support, because we do everything kind of with the passion of our hearts. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, it was an absolute blast. I appreciate the time. Rocco, I know you got to get out of here, so I'm going to let you go. This has been the College Baseball Experience on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. I bid you adieu. you better start thinking about your